Hello everyone, my name is John. Thank you for being here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how the meat and dairy industry killed a government guide back in 1991. Now, the news organizations called it a scandal, industries versus public health. It was a mess, except both sides were wrong. And because of that, the meat industry and their lobbyists was able to block this nutrition guide that would have harmed our health. But the one that was finalized as a result of this clash harmed our health. Well, why is that? Because both sides had their agenda in mind, and our health wasn't part of that agenda. These are businesses, million and billion dollar businesses. They have shareholders and all of those things. So our interest is not their interest. So neither side was fighting for what was best for our health. Now, the obesity rate in 1976 was about 15%. However, after this new pyramid nutritional guideline was out, and after following this pyramid for decades, the obesity rate skyrocketed to 36%. So this isn't a story about one industry winning over the other. It's about a system where the USDA has two contradictory mandates: promote American agriculture on one hand and provide nutrition advice to Americans on the other hand. And because those two are in conflict with each other, agriculture wins and public health loses. And we as citizens caught in the middle. Let's get right to the heart of this story. In April 1991, Agriculture Secretary Edward Madigan withdrew a government nutrition guide that had already been printed and was ready for distribution. The reason? The meat and dairy industries complained, but the real scandal wasn't that lobbyists killed the pyramid, it was that the pyramid they stopped would have been just as harmful as what eventually replaced it. This is the story of how industry infighting exposed that American nutrition policy was already broken. What I'm about to show you reveals how the 1991 food pyramid controversy became the perfect smokescreen. While everyone focused on meat and dairy lobbyists blocking publication, almost nobody noticed the deeper problem. The pyramid itself was built on decades of corrupted nutrition science that had already shifted dietary guidance away from whole foods and towards subsidized agricultural commodities. This isn't just about one industry winning over another. It's about a system where neither side was fighting for your health. In the late 1980s, the USDA developed its Eating Right pyramid to replace the traditional food wheel that had been used since the 1950s. According to Marion Nestle's research published in the International Journal of Health Services in 1993, the pyramid materials were sent to printers in February 1991. The design positioned grains, cereals, bread, and pasta at the pyramid's broad foundation, recommending 6 to 11 servings daily. Meat and dairy were placed in a narrow band near the top, alongside fats and sweets, the foods Americans were told to eat sparingly. The USDA's stated goal was to create a visual representation of healthy eating proportions. But as Nestle documented, this wasn't purely science-based guidance. It was agricultural policy disguised as nutrition advice. When the Washington Post reported on the pyramid in April 1991, representatives from the National Cattlemen's Association and National Milk Producers Federation immediately demanded meetings with Secretary Madigan. Elisa Harrison from the National Cattlemen's Association told the Post that consumers would interpret the pyramid to mean they should drastically cut down on meat consumption. Janine Kinney from the National Milk Producers Federation complained that the design stigmatized their products. On April 26, 1991, Secretary Madigan announced the pyramid's withdrawal. His official explanation: the pyramid was confusing to children. Kelly Shipp, Madigan's spokesperson, insisted the decision wasn't driven primarily by industry complaints, saying they were persuaded by all the concerns raised. But Marion Nestle, then chair of nutrition at New York University, told the Post there was a long history of the USDA altering or canceling nutrition publications in response to industry pressure. She noted similar incidents in 1979 and 1981 when pamphlets recommending less fatty meat and fewer eggs were blocked or withdrawn. Here's what the media coverage missed. The meat and dairy industries were right to object to the pyramid, but for the wrong reasons. They weren't defending nutrient-dense, grass-fed beef or full-fat dairy. They were protecting market share for industrial meat and dairy products that had already been processed and compromised. Meanwhile, the pyramid they opposed was recommending 6 to 11 daily servings of grains, a foundation built on cheap, subsidized agricultural commodities, not human nutritional needs. This wasn't a battle between health and industry, it was a fight between competing industry interests with public health caught in the crossfire. The pyramid controversy exposed the USDA's fundamental conflict of interest. The agency has a dual mandate to both promote American agricultural products and provide nutritional guidance to consumers. When those two missions conflict, when what's profitable for agriculture isn't what's healthful for people, which priority wins? The answer became clear when Secretary Madigan spent an additional $855,000 testing alternative pyramid designs. In April 1992, the USDA released a modified version. Grains remained at the foundation. The 6 to 11 servings recommendation stayed. The only real changes were cosmetic adjustments to soften industry objections. What actually happened to American health? According to CDC data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, obesity prevalence among American adults ages 20 to 74 tells a clear story. Between 1976 and 1980, the obesity rate was 15%. From 1988 to 1994, it was 23%. And from 1999 to 2002, the obesity rate had ballooned to 31%. Obesity rates doubled in the decades following the adoption of grain-heavy dietary guidelines. This correlation doesn't prove simple causation, but the pattern is impossible to ignore. As Americans followed government advice to eat more grains and less fat, chronic disease rates exploded. The pyramid didn't prevent obesity and diabetes. It coincided with their dramatic rise. While the traditional culture's claims about Inuit and Maasai have been thoroughly debunked by modern research, there is strong scientific evidence about what happens when populations shift from whole foods to processed diets. Studies of the Pima Indians, Pacific Island populations, and Aboriginal Australians consistently show a clear pattern. When traditional diets, regardless of their macronutrient composition, are replaced with refined carbohydrates, added sugars, and processed foods, chronic disease rates increase dramatically. A 2022 systematic review published in Frontiers in Nutrition examined dietary transitions in multiple populations and found that the nutrient category most strongly associated with negative health outcomes, especially obesity and diabetes, was sugar and refined carbohydrates, while increased calories was less strongly associated with these disorders.
Now, during this pyramid controversy, Agriculture Secretary Madigan spent $855,000 testing whether or not children could understand the pyramid after beef companies complained. Meanwhile, the foundation of this food pyramid, 6 to 11 servings of grain, stayed unchanged. Well, why is that? It's because grain subsidies are the backbone of farm policy. Between 1995 and 2021, the USDA distributed $478 billion in agricultural subsidies. Corn, wheat, and soybean got the vast majority of these subsidies. Fruits and vegetables, these specialty crops receive less than 1% support. How can you possibly expect an agency that exists to promote corn to tell Americans eat less corn? This dual mandate guarantees that agriculture shapes nutrition advice, not biology. The 1991 pyramid controversy was actually the culmination of a battle that had been lost decades earlier. In 2016, NPR and the Journal of the American Medical Association revealed that the Sugar Research Foundation had paid Harvard researchers in the 1960s to publish studies shifting blame for heart disease from sugar to saturated fat. That campaign succeeded in poisoning American nutrition science at its source. By 1991, the question wasn't whether government dietary advice would prioritize whole foods over processed. That battle was already over. The only question was which industries' processed products would get favorable placement. While meat and dairy companies publicly fought the pyramid, they shared common ground with grain and sugar industries. All profited from a system that prioritized processed, shelf-stable, industrially produced foods over fresh, whole alternatives. Grain companies wanted Americans eating more processed cereals and breads. Meat companies wanted market share for industrially raised, grain-fed beef. Dairy wanted volume sales of low-fat milk. Sugar companies wanted their role minimized while carbohydrates were promoted. Nobody was advocating for grass-fed beef, pastured eggs, wild-caught fish, and seasonal vegetables, the foods that actually sustain human health before industrial agriculture. The revised pyramid, released in April 1992, became one of the most widely distributed nutrition education materials in American history. Schools, hospitals, and government programs based their food services on its recommendations. A generation of Americans grew up being told that 6 to 11 servings of grains should form the foundation of their diet, while fats, both harmful trans fats and beneficial natural fats, should be minimized. The results speak for themselves. The CDC reports that obesity rates continued climbing throughout the 1990s and 2000s, eventually reaching epidemic proportions that persist today. Understanding the 1991 pyramid scandal helps clarify why government dietary guidance so often conflicts with optimal health outcomes. When the agency responsible for agricultural promotion writes nutrition advice, and when that advice gets filtered through industry lobbying from multiple directions, the result rarely serves public health. This doesn't mean meat and dairy are essential or that any single macronutrient ratio is the answer. It means that nutrition guidance driven by agricultural economics rather than human biology tends to produce poor health outcomes. The most consistent finding across decades of nutrition research is simple. Whole, minimally processed foods support health better than refined, industrially produced alternatives, regardless of whether those foods are grains, meats, or anything else. The 1991 food pyramid scandal revealed that American nutrition policy was broken long before meat and dairy lobbyists complained. Their objections simply exposed a system that had already prioritized agricultural commodities over human health. The pyramid that was blocked would have been harmful. The pyramid that eventually replaced it was harmful. The entire debate was a distraction from the fundamental problem: government dietary guidance shaped by industry interests rather than independent science. When neither side of an industry battle is fighting for your health, the solution isn't picking the right industry to support. It's recognizing that optimal nutrition doesn't require government approval, committee consensus, or industry marketing. It requires whole foods that humans evolved eating. Your health decisions shouldn't depend on which industry won a lobbying battle in 1991. They should depend on understanding what actually nourishes human biology. If this investigation into the food pyramid controversy was informative, share it with others who follow government dietary guidelines. Understanding how industry lobbying shapes official nutrition advice helps everyone make more informed food choices.
So there you have it. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I hope you got value out of it. Now, in the description, there's a link to the MAP 30 challenge. And the MAP 30 challenge is basically for those people who are looking to drop a few pounds and get healthier. It's my own personal journey from 294 pounds and losing over 100 pounds. And you can find the link for that in the description. Check it out. All the information is on the website. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video.